Eli Winters had always liked the quiet. Vesper 9, the human colony orbiting the gas giant Pharos, was the perfect place for it. The colony wasn't much, a scattering of modular habitats, a few hydroponic greenhouses, and the control center for the orbital mining drones. But to Eli, it was home. He enjoyed the steady hum of the life support systems, the way the lights reflected off the polished floors of the corridors, and the occasional soft sigh of the wind through the ventilation ducts. Nothing ever surprised him here. Nothing, that is, until the morning of the arrival. It started with a shimmer in the sky, a strange ripple of light across the gas giant's upper atmosphere. At first, Eli thought it was some anomaly in the colony's radar or a reflection from the mining drones. But when he went outside to the observation deck, his stomach twisted into an uncomfortable knot. There, descending through the multicolored clouds of Pharos, was a ship. It wasn't like the usual freight or research vessels that docked at the colony. This one was smaller, sleek, and glowing faintly with an unfamiliar energy signature. Before he could call for assistance, the ship's engine coughed, sputtered, and then went silent. It plummeted through the thin upper atmosphere and came to rest on a nearby plateau with a shudder that rattled the observation deck. Dust and debris spiraled into the air, and Eli's heart thumped in his chest. Emergency signals were already sending alerts across the colony, but curiosity and something else, a feeling he couldn't quite name, drove him to don his suit and head for the shuttle bay. When Eli arrived at the crash site, he expected panic or at least confusion. Instead, there were four figures emerging from the ship, moving with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. They were tall, taller than any human he had ever met, with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered in shades of violet and silver under the light of Pharos, twin suns. Their faces were smooth, angular, and undeniably beautiful, yet their eyes carried a weight, a sorrow that was impossible to ignore. Eli stopped in his tracks. He had seen aliens in hollow images, in textbooks, even in training simulations, but nothing prepared him for this. And yet, instead of fear or awe, he felt something oddly ordinary, responsibility. The tallest among them stepped forward. "We request shelter," she said, her voice melodic, the words accented but entirely understandable. "Our ship is damaged. We require aid." Eli swallowed. "Oh, okay. I mean, sure, follow me. There's a workshop back at the colony. We can patch things up there." They regarded him silently for a moment, their glowing eyes scanning him as if weighing his worth. Eli felt awkward under their gaze, suddenly conscious of his slightly rumpled uniform, the smudge of grease on his sleeve, and the fact that he had forgotten to comb his hair. Still, he held his ground. Somehow, he knew the right thing to do was to act normal. "You are human," said one, her voice softer, almost gentle. "You will help us." "Yes," Eli said, nodding. "I mean, I'll try. I'm good with machines." He realized how small that sounded compared to the aura of sophistication these aliens exuded. "Repairs, systems, that sort of thing." The aliens exchanged glances. One of them tilted her head in what might have been amusement. "It seems unusual. We expected someone of higher rank, perhaps a leader of your colony." Eli shrugged. "This is me. I'm the engineer, mostly. But I know how to fix things, so that's helpful, right?" The aliens did not respond immediately. Instead, they followed him in silence as he led them to the colony. The trek wasn't long, but every step felt strange. The plateau was rough, and Eli had to carefully guide them over uneven terrain. Occasionally, he caught one of them staring at the strange machinery scattered along the landscape, the mining drones, the communication towers, the compact vehicles. He caught himself smiling. It was one thing to read about human technology, another entirely to see someone marvel at it. By the time they reached the colony's workshop, Eli was sweating, his suit sticking to his skin, but he was proud. "Here we are," he said. "Home sweet workshop." The aliens looked around. their eyes widening slightly at the sheer amount of machinery, tools, and spare parts stacked along the walls. One of them reached out and touched a panel of exposed circuits, her fingers brushing the wires delicately. "Curious," she murmured. "Your species creates with simplicity yet achieves much." Eli felt a spark of pride. "Thanks," he said, trying not to sound too smug. "We humans are creative, I guess. We get by with what we have." They nodded, seemingly approving. Then the tallest spoke again. "We will stay here until our vessel is ready. It seems your abilities may suffice." Eli swallowed nervously. I can try, but I should probably see what's wrong with your ship first." The aliens led him back outside, where the ship rested on the plateau, its sleek hull dented, its energy core flickering erratically. Eli circled it, inspecting the damage. Panels were torn, the propulsion system was unstable, and there were scorch marks along the hull. It looked like a disaster, but Eli was not one to panic. He examined the ship's systems with a critical eye, noting the irregularities in the energy flow and the misalignment of the thrusters. He jotted down notes, muttering to himself in his usual offhand way. "Okay, we can reroute the stabilizers, maybe reinforce the hull with spare plating. He'll need to recalibrate the gravity dampeners." The aliens watched him quietly, their expressions inscrutable. One of them finally spoke. "You are calm, even in the presence of what could be fatal malfunction." Eli grinned, scratching the back of his head. "Yeah, well, panic doesn't really fix things, it just makes the mess bigger." They studied him again, and for the first time, Eli thought he saw something like respect, or maybe curiosity in their eyes. He had not expected that. Humans were used to being underestimated, but these aliens were not. And yet here they were, watching him as though he had some remarkable talent. "Perhaps your species is more capable than we imagined," the tallest said. Eli laughed a little awkwardly. "Well, maybe, or maybe we're just stubborn." That evening, the aliens allowed him to bring them into the colony's main habitat. They moved with grace, but their mourning was visible. Eli noticed how often they looked out the windows, their eyes distant, as though seeing memories that only they could understand. "Do you grieve?" Eli asked gently, unsure if it was appropriate. The tallest shook her head slightly. "We remember, we mourn, our companions are gone. It is why we traveled so far seeking refuge. We were alone." Eli nodded. "I understand," he said softly. "Humans, we do that too. We remember, and we find ways to keep going." They looked at him, and for a moment the weight of their sorrow seemed lighter. Eli could not explain it, but something about his presence, his ordinary human presence, was enough to make them pause, to reconsider the hopelessness they had felt. Over the next few hours, Eli offered them simple comforts: water, food, a place to sit while they rested. He explained the colony's systems, showed them the hydroponic gardens, even made a joke about how humans survived on caffeine and stubbornness. The aliens tilted their heads in confusion and amusement. They did not fully understand humor, but they appreciated it nonetheless. As night fell over Pharos, the gas giant casting a swirling glow across the colony, Eli sat outside with the aliens. The wind was cool, the stars above twinkling faintly through the thick atmosphere. He had no idea what the next days would bring, whether he could repair the ship, or how these extraordinary visitors would react to life on a human colony. But one thing was certain. For the first time in a long time, Eli Winters felt that his quiet life had become something remarkable. 4 beings from another world had come seeking shelter, expecting authority or power, and they had found a human instead. And somehow that seemed enough. The morning light of Pharos spilled across Vesper 9 like melted gold, bathing the colony in soft warmth. Eli woke early, as usual, walking through the quiet corridors to the workshop. He expected the aliens to still be asleep, perhaps exhausted from the long journey, but when he entered, they were already there. The 4 Velari were standing near the windows, watching the shifting clouds of the gas giant below. Their graceful forms were silhouetted by the amber light, their shimmering skin reflecting the hues of the sky. Eli hesitated for a moment, not wanting to disturb them, but the tallest spoke first. "You sleep lightly," she observed, her voice calm and precise. "Your species moves early, always active." Eli smiled, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, humans like to start early. We call it, getting a head start on the day." Another of the aliens tilted her head, curious. "A head start on what?" "On life," Eli said, shrugging. "On fixing things, on doing work, on, well, living." He realized that sounded vague even to him. "Basically, we don't waste time if we can help it." The aliens seemed to consider this, their glowing eyes following him as he moved toward a workbench piled with tools. "You are practical," the tallest said. "Mostly," Eli replied, picking up a small scanner. "I like to solve problems. That's my job here. Life support systems, mining drones, vehicles, and now maybe your ship." The Velari exchanged glances. "Your abilities may indeed suffice," the tallest repeated. "But your approach is different from ours. We rely on precision, on calculation. You rely on intuition." Eli laughed softly. "Yeah, that's probably true. I guess humans improvise. We figure things out as we go." The alien studied him for a moment in silence. Then one of them, smaller than the others, spoke, her voice a soft hum. "We wish to learn this method. We wish to see how your species survives with intuition alone." Eli shrugged, smiling. "Well, I don't know if you'll call it surviving, but I'll show you how we fix things." And with that, the day began. Eli led the aliens to their ship, pointing out the damage, explaining which parts could be repaired and which would need replacement. They listened carefully, their expressions serious, but every so often one of them tilted her head in wonder at some human tool or method. "You use such small devices," the tallest noted, touching a multi-tool Eli carried. "Why not larger instruments?" Eli grinned. "Sometimes smaller works better. Easier to handle, faster to use. Bigger isn't always better." They studied the tool, examining it from every angle, and then one of them mimicked his hand movements, trying to open and close it. Eli chuckled. "Careful. Those things can snap if you squeeze the wrong way." The aliens laughed, or at least a sound very much like laughter, a melodic combination of tones that Eli could not fully reproduce. It made him grin. "See, humans aren't the only ones who can have fun while working." For hours they worked together, Eli showing them how to reroute power systems, patch damaged circuits, and recalibrate energy flows. At first, the aliens were clumsy, their long fingers knocking over tools and wires, but soon they began to understand. They watched his methods, repeated his steps, and slowly their own skill improved. Eli noticed that it wasn't just their hands that were learning, it was their thinking. They began improvising like humans, suggesting solutions that weren't in their manuals. One of them, the smallest, suggested using a spare panel from a different section of the ship to reinforce a damaged hull segment. Eli blinked. "Hey, that's smart," he said. "Exactly the kind of thinking we humans do." The aliens exchanged quiet glances, and Eli realized they were smiling, or at least the closest thing their species had to smiling. They were learning, and that made him proud. By midday, they paused for food. Eli had prepared a simple human meal, bread, cheese, and some protein packets. The Velari watched him with curiosity as he ate, sniffing the bread and poking at the cheese. "You consume solid material?" the tallest asked. "How inefficient. Why not absorb nutrients directly?" Eli laughed. "It's not about efficiency. Eating is social, fun, part of living." They watched him, tilting their heads. Eli offered them some bread. Tentatively, they took it, biting carefully. Their eyes widened. "Interesting," one said. "Flavor, texture, combination unexpected." Eli grinned. "Exactly. Humans like to experiment with taste. Sometimes it works, sometimes, well, it's interesting." He laughed at his own joke. The Velari didn't fully get it, but their attention was rapt. After eating, they returned to the workshop. Eli introduced them to some of the colony's simpler machines, drones, repair bots, and a small vehicle. He demonstrated how to operate each, letting them take turns piloting them. The aliens were fascinated by the technology, but more by the way Eli handled it all with casual confidence. "You do not panic," one of them said. "Even when systems fail, when danger is present, you remain calm." Eli shrugged. "Panicking never helps. You think clearly, you fix things. That's what humans do." As the day wore on, Eli taught them more than just repair. He taught them human habits, making small jokes to ease tension, humming while working to keep spirits up, and improvising when parts or resources were missing. The Velari absorbed everything with astonishing speed, their expressions a mixture of concentration and wonder. By late afternoon, Eli could see a change. The grief in their eyes, which had been so heavy when they arrived, was lighter. They moved more freely, their shoulders less tense, and their curiosity was returning. "You heal with knowledge," the tallest said quietly, almost to herself. "Not with energy, not with rituals, with understanding. This is human strength." Eli smiled. "I guess that's one way to put it. We humans, we find ways to keep going, even when things seem hopeless." They worked late into the night and the ship began to take shape again. Panels were reinforced, circuits repaired, and the propulsion system stabilized. The aliens marveled at the small details Eli had attended to, the way he patched a dent without affecting surrounding panels, the clever reroute of power that kept energy flowing without overloading the system. "You have intuition," one of them said softly. "It is remarkable. Even we could not have predicted some of your solutions." Eli laughed softly, exhausted but satisfied. "It's just thinking creatively, I guess. Humans are stubborn. We refuse to give up." The Velari looked at him for a long moment, then turned their attention back to the ship. Eli realized something important. They were not just learning to repair their vessel. They were learning to see humans differently, to understand that humans were capable, brave, and clever in ways that could surprise even advanced civilizations. Late that night, Eli finally stepped away from the workshop. He walked to the observation deck and looked out at the gas giant, its clouds swirling with strange colors, reflecting the lights of the colony. He thought about the aliens, sitting inside, working quietly but with growing confidence. It amazed him. He had expected fear, perhaps suspicion. He had not expected admiration. And yet, that was exactly what he saw reflected in their eyes over the course of the day. As he watched, he realized that this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, they would work on the propulsion system. They would need his guidance for navigation recalibrations. They would need him in ways he had not yet imagined. And somehow he knew humans would rise to the occasion. They always did. A soft sound drew his attention. One of the Velari had come to the observation deck, standing silently beside him. "You teach without force," she said, her voice calm. "Yet you inspire. We did not expect this from a human." Eli turned to her, smiling gently. "I don't know if humans are special. We just try. We help. That's what matters, right?" She nodded, her gaze returning to the gas giant. "Yes, it is enough for now." Eli stayed there with her for a while, looking out at the swirling clouds of Pharos, listening to the soft hum of the colony. He realized then that the Velari were not just guests. They were witnesses to human ingenuity, humor, and resilience. They were learning to see humans as more than they had expected. As the night deepened, Eli returned to his quarters, tired but content. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, and more opportunities to show what humans could do. But for now, he slept with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had begun something important, teaching others that humans, while ordinary in many ways, were extraordinary in spirit. And in the darkness of Vesper 9, the four Velari widows slept as well, dreaming of repair, of survival, and of the strange, clever human who had welcomed them into his home and into his world. The next morning, Vesper 9 woke under a pale violet light, the swirling clouds of Pharos, reflecting soft hues across the colony. Eli rose early, as he always did, to check the ship again. This time, he had a plan. The Velari's propulsion system needed a rare crystal to stabilize the energy flow. Without it, the ship couldn't safely navigate back to their home system. Eli had never seen the crystal on Vesper 9. It was only rumored to exist in one of the nearby asteroid fields, a cluster of jagged rocks and drifting debris left over from ancient collisions. Mining it would be dangerous, low gravity, sharp rocks, unpredictable trajectories, but Eli was determined. He couldn't let the aliens' journey fail. When he explained the situation to the Velari, they listened quietly, their expressions solemn. The tallest spoke first. "You intend to retrieve this material personally?" "Yes," Eli said simply. "I know where it might be. We can collect it safely if we plan carefully. I'll need your help, of course." The aliens exchanged glances. Their culture valued efficiency, logic, and calculated risk. Improvisation, Eli's method, was foreign to them. Still, they had begun to trust him, and that trust was growing. "Very well," said the tallest. "We shall assist you." Eli grinned, a little surprised. "Great, let's get started then." They prepared quickly. Eli packed tools, stabilizers, and safety harnesses. The Velari watched curiously as he attached a simple magnetic tether to his suit. "This will keep us from drifting off the rocks," he explained. "We humans like to improvise." The Velari's expressions were unreadable, but Eli could feel their curiosity and maybe admiration. The journey to the asteroid field was tense. The small shuttle vibrated as it passed through the outer debris, the hull rattling with each near collision. Eli piloted carefully, guiding the craft through the maze of floating rocks. The Velari, accustomed to smooth, flawless travel, were impressed by his steady hands and calm focus. "This is unsettling," murmured one of them, her voice like a soft bell. "But your control is precise. Remarkable," Eli laughed. "Thanks. It's all about paying attention, not panicking. That's how humans survive situations like this." They reached the cluster of asteroids, jagged and rough, floating silently in the void. Eli pointed to a faint glimmer on one of the rocks. "That's it, that's where the crystals are." The Velari studied the rock. "It seems fragile. How will you extract it?" Eli grinned. "Carefully, that's the key. Watch and learn." He floated toward the rock, tether attached, reaching for the crystals. His hands moved quickly, using a small laser cutter to separate them from the rough surface. The Velari watched, amazed at his skill. "You do not hesitate," said the tallest. "Even when failure is possible, you act with confidence." Eli shrugged. "We humans know that hesitation can be dangerous. Sometimes you just have to take action and fix the consequences later." One of the aliens leaned forward, mimicking his movements. She picked up a crystal carefully, examining it. "It is delicate, yet your method works." Eli smiled. "See, improvisation works even if it seems strange." Suddenly, a small fragment of the asteroid broke loose. It drifted toward Eli and the Velari, threatening to knock them off balance. Without thinking, Eli adjusted his tether and grabbed a small stabilizer, sending a controlled pulse that deflected the fragment safely away. The Velari watched in silence. Then the smallest of them said, almost in awe, "You anticipate danger. Instinctively, this is human strength." Eli laughed softly. "It's just paying attention. Humans have survived by noticing things others miss." Once the crystals were collected, Eli guided the team back to the shuttle. He stored the crystals in secure compartments, making sure they wouldn't break during the return. The Velari watched him, their expressions unreadable but thoughtful. When they returned to the colony, Eli immediately began work on installing the crystals into the ship's propulsion system. The Velari assisted, following his instructions, but also learning to improvise as he did. "You are patient," said the tallest, watching him carefully. Even when tasks are tedious, you maintain focus. Your species has endurance. Eli smiled. Patience is important. Humans survive because we keep going, even when it's hard. The installation was delicate. One wrong move could damage the crystals and set the repair back by days. Eli guided the Velari step by step, showing them how to align the crystals and calibrate the energy flow. Their long fingers were surprisingly precise, but it was Eli's guidance that made the difference. Hours passed. Sweat dripped down Eli's forehead. The Velari worked steadily, their expressions a mix of concentration and curiosity. Slowly, the propulsion system stabilized. Energy readings normalized and the hum of the ship shifted to a steady, confident tone. Eli leaned back, exhausted but proud. "We did it," he said simply. The Velari looked at him, and for the first time their faces showed something like admiration or maybe even awe. "You have taught us," said the tallest. "Not only how to repair but how to adapt. This is valuable knowledge." Eli shrugged. "I just showed you what humans do. We survive. We adapt. That's all." Later, as the sun of Pharos began to set, Eli invited the Velari to the colony's observation deck. They watched the gas giant's clouds swirl, casting shifting colors across the horizon. Eli handed them a small cup of warm, liquid coffee, the human beverage he insisted was essential for survival. "You drink this daily?" asked the smallest alien, sniffing the steam. Eli nodded. "Yep. Helps wake us up, keeps us alert, sometimes helps with thinking." He took a sip and grinned. "It's comforting." The Velari tasted it hesitantly. Their eyes widened at the bitter warmth. "Interesting," one said. "It awakens the senses." Eli laughed. "Exactly. Humans have a lot of little tricks like that. We find comfort in small things." They watched the gas giant in silence, and Eli realized the Velari were no longer just visitors. They were beginning to understand humans in a deeper way. They had seen ingenuity, patience, humor, and improvisation in action. They had witnessed resilience and calm in danger, and slowly they were beginning to admire it. "You inspire confidence," said the tallest. "Not through power, not through authority, but through presence. This is rare among beings we have met." Eli smiled softly. "I'm just me. Humans do what we can even when things seem impossible." The Velari considered this. Then the smallest spoke, a note of curiosity in her melodic voice. "Do all humans adapt so easily, so calmly?" Eli shrugged. "Not always, but we try, and that's what counts." Night fell over Vesper 9 and the team returned to the workshop. Eli checked the propulsion system again, making sure the crystals were stable, the energy flow smooth, and the ship ready for flight. The Velari watched, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and respect. "You are more capable than we imagined," said the tallest. "Not in strength, not in speed, but in ingenuity. You adapt, you survive, you persist." Eli grinned. "Thanks, that's humans for you." As the night deepened, Eli reflected on the day. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and a task that could have failed at any moment. Yet here they were. The ship was repaired, the crystals secure, and the Velari were learning to see humans differently, not as weak, not as simple, but as clever, resourceful, and brave. The smallest Velari approached him quietly. "You teach without force. You guide without command. Yet we follow willingly. This human way is remarkable." Eli smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's just how we live. We help when we can, and we figure things out as we go." She nodded, watching him with an expression that was almost reverent. For Eli, the moment was simple, ordinary even. But for the Velari, it was extraordinary. They were beginning to understand humans in a way no one else had shown them. As he prepared to rest, Eli glanced out the window at the repaired ship, glowing faintly under the light of Pharos. Tomorrow, they would continue testing systems, calibrate navigation, and prepare for the long journey home. But for now, the day had been a success. They had faced a challenge, relied on human ingenuity, and come out stronger together. And Eli realized something important. It wasn't just about fixing a ship. It was about showing the Velari what humans could do, the patience, the adaptability, the creativity, and the courage. For all their sorrow, all their experiences across the galaxy, they were learning something new from him, that even an ordinary human could inspire hope, solve problems, and make a difference in ways that were extraordinary. And in that realization, Eli felt a quiet satisfaction. He was ordinary, yes, but his ingenuity, his calm, and his humanity had become something powerful in their eyes. As the colony settled into quiet for the night, the four Velari slept, their minds busy with wonder, curiosity, and something new, a respect for the human who had shown them that even the most ordinary beings could achieve the extraordinary. The morning on Vesper 9 came slowly, with the soft violet and amber clouds of Pharos stretching across the horizon. Eli woke with a sense of quiet purpose. Today would be a different kind of work. The crystals were installed, the propulsion system stabilized, and the Velari had begun to trust him more than he expected. Now it was time to teach them about navigation and operational intuition, skills that no manual could fully explain. When Eli entered the workshop, the Velari were already there, observing the ship with an intensity that made him smile. They were not just waiting for instructions, they wanted to understand. The tallest one stepped forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You plan to teach us something, beyond mechanics?" "Yes," Eli said, leaning against a workbench. "Machines are one thing, but traveling through space safely, that's more than just fixing stuff. It's about understanding, predicting, and adapting." The Velari listened closely as he explained human navigation methods, starting with the simplest: observing star patterns, reading subtle energy signals, and estimating trajectories based on small cues that others might overlook. He demonstrated using the ship's instruments, then asked them to try on their own. At first, they were cautious. Their species relied on precision calculations, energy matrices, and predictive algorithms. To them, Eli's approach seemed unpredictable. But as he guided them, showing them how intuition and careful observation could complement their systems, they began to adapt. One of the Velari, the smallest and most curious, reached for the navigation console. "You trust what is not entirely measurable?" she asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Eli smiled. "We humans learn to trust what we see, what we feel, and what we notice. Not everything can be calculated. Sometimes you just have to read the situation." The alien's expression softened as she tried again, following his instructions. Slowly, hesitantly at first, she adjusted the course of the ship in a small simulation. The system responded perfectly. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "It works. We did not expect this." Eli shrugged. "That's the thing about humans. We try, we adapt, and sometimes it works better than expected." The Velari worked together, following his lead but adding their own understanding. Each small success seemed to lighten their spirits. For the first time since their arrival, Eli noticed faint smiles, or the closest thing to smiles their species displayed, on their faces. After several hours of instruction, Eli suggested a break. He led them to the colony's small garden, where hydroponic plants thrived under artificial lights. The Velari observed in quiet fascination, their attention drawn to the way humans cultivated life from scratch. "You nurture these plants?" asked the tallest. "With such care?" Eli nodded. "Yes, life is important, even the smallest forms. It teaches patience, responsibility, and respect." He bent to check a tomato plant, adjusting a support and wiping a drop of condensation. "And it's satisfying when it works." The Velari touched the leaves gently, their long fingers careful not to damage them. "You find joy in growth," said one. "Even small growth. This is human strength, yes," Eli smiled. "You could say that. Humans grow in more ways than just plants. We grow in ideas, in actions, in relationships. That's what keeps us going." They spent the afternoon testing the ship's systems together. Eli watched as they began to anticipate problems before he even pointed them out, offering solutions he hadn't considered. He realized then that teaching wasn't just about instructing, it was about inspiring confidence, encouraging ingenuity, and showing that small, steady actions could achieve remarkable results. During a pause, the Velari gathered around him. "You show us how to continue even when there is loss," said the tallest, her voice quiet. "You do not minimize grief, but you endure. This is human courage." Eli looked at her, surprised by her insight. "We humans, we don't ignore sorrow, we feel it, we remember. But we also move forward. That's how we survive." The aliens nodded, each lost in thought. They had arrived mourning, expecting to find someone powerful or influential. Instead, they had found a human ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in action. His calm, his humor, and his ability to solve problems had begun to shift something in them. Later, Eli led them to a simulation chamber in the colony. The room was small but filled with holographic star maps and spatial anomaly projections. "I want you to practice predicting space hazards," he explained. "Use your systems but also pay attention to your instincts. Notice patterns, predict outcomes. That's how humans survive." The Velari hesitated. Prediction based on instinct was foreign. But under Eli's patient guidance, they began. They adjusted courses, anticipated debris in simulations, and coordinated their actions in ways that were unconventional but effective. Eli watched them, impressed not by their skill alone but by their willingness to learn differently. "You have taught us to see differently," said the smallest, "to adapt not only to tools but to situations. This is remarkable." Eli shrugged, though he felt a quiet pride. "It's just how we live. Humans find solutions, we improvise, we care enough to try." As night approached, Eli suggested a small exercise, stargazing. He led the Velari to the observation deck, where the swirling clouds of Pharos reflected colors across the colony. "Look there," he said, pointing to a distant star cluster. "That's where humans first imagined traveling beyond our planet. We didn't know how, but we imagined it anyway. Imagination is the first step toward action." The Velari watched, mesmerized. Their glowing eyes followed the patterns of stars, the subtle movement of distant planets. Eli told them stories of humans who had overcome impossible odds, of small victories that changed lives, of ordinary people who achieved extraordinary things. "They are simple beings," said the tallest, "yet they accomplish so much." Eli smiled softly. "We may be simple, but we keep trying. That's what matters." They sat together, listening to his stories until the gas giant's shadow deepened over the colony. For the first time since their journey began, the Velari laughed, not at something strange, but with genuine joy. They mimicked a few human gestures, tried to imitate a joke, and marveled at the human way of expressing emotion through humor. "You are unusual," said the smallest, her voice soft. "Not because of strength or skill, but because you inspire. You show that even ordinary beings can achieve extraordinary things." Eli nodded. "That's humans. We're not the strongest, not the fastest, but we find ways. We survive, we adapt, and we care enough to try." The Velari looked at him for a long time, their expressions thoughtful. Eli realized they were beginning to understand the heart of humanity: courage, curiosity, empathy, and determination, not through demonstrations of power, but through everyday action. Later, as they prepared for rest, the tallest spoke quietly, almost to herself. "We came seeking shelter and found a human instead. Yet he has given us more than shelter. He has shown us hope." Eli, unaware of her words at first, paused in the doorway. He realized that what he had considered ordinary, his curiosity, patience, and willingness to help, was something extraordinary to them. They were not impressed by status, power, or skill alone. They were impressed by humanity itself. He walked to the observation deck one last time before sleep, staring at the swirling storms of Pharos. The colony was quiet, the lights of the habitat soft and welcoming. He thought about the day's lessons, the laughter, the stories, and the small victories in the simulation. For the Velari, this was more than learning to repair a ship. It was learning to see life through a human lens, appreciating the small details, valuing perseverance, and understanding that courage was not always loud or visible, but often quiet and persistent. Eli felt a warmth he could not explain. He had not sought recognition or admiration. He had simply acted as himself. Yet in doing so, he had made a difference, showing these aliens that humans were more than their appearance, more than their size, more than their limitations. Humans had ingenuity, resilience, and heart. As the night deepened, the Velari slept nearby, and Eli stayed at the observation deck a while longer. He realized that tomorrow would bring new challenges, final tests of the ship, preparation for departure, and perhaps even more opportunities to show what humans could do. But for now, he allowed himself a quiet satisfaction. He had shared human knowledge, human curiosity, and human resilience. He had shown that even the simplest acts, teaching, laughing, observing, improvising, could inspire others in ways he could not have imagined. And as the stars glimmered faintly above the swirling storms of Pharos, Eli knew that the Velari would never forget this lesson. That humans, ordinary though they may seem, possessed a quiet strength that could survive, adapt, and inspire across the galaxy. He finally turned toward his quarters, smiling to himself. He had faced uncertainty, guided beings from another world, and emerged not as a hero in the traditional sense, but as a human, curious, patient, and inventive. And that, he realized, was extraordinary enough.